Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel, and I am delighted to welcome back Gill Dorren.
Hello.
Now, you're back because I don't feel that we did justice to our last discussion about this amazing course that you did for the Astrological Lodge of London. It was called The Cosmos and Astrology, and I still recommend everybody to go to the Astrological Lodge of London's website and find the talk, because there's so much in it. And we talked about the more recent discoveries in astronomy and how they relate to astrology. But we didn't get around to talk about, let's put it this way, as exciting as I found that part of the talk, the bit that made me light up the most was when you started talking about indicators of spirituality in the birth chart.
Yes.
And you were talking about prenatal eclipses, and in relation to karmic astrology and spirituality, I thought, we never got around to talking about my very favorite bits.
Okay.
So here you are. And, well, let's begin with prenatal eclipses, Jill. What are they?
Prenatal eclipses are when you do look at your chart, you look, you've got solar fire or any other astrological, website, computer program. Look back at the eclipses prior to your date, to your birth. And if you look at the chart of the time and everything that goes around it, you can kind of see where you might have come from, what karma you're bringing into this existence, into this lifetime, and also look at not only look at the eclipses, but look at the new moon or the full moon prior to your birth as well, and look at that chart as well, just to get a taste of what you might be bringing into this lifetime and what you have to, what you're looking for karmically, and to see what pointers it's going to give you to what you're going to learn in this lifetime, and what your spirit or your soul is trying to achieve in this lifetime as it moves through the space-time continuum, if you get my drift.
Yep. And I think, it's interesting because we're looking now at the pre-birth period. So this is the period in utero. And so there we are inside our mothers, but there's already things going on astrologically which are linked with the incarnation before we are even born. So we have the birth chart. And I think, this feeds into the whole discussion about whether a chart should be done for conception. Well, probably yes, but how many people will be able to do that? But we have got these other tools.
Okay, I'll tell you a funny story then, because I'm full of funny stories, especially about my family. Especially what my sister says, and it kind of led me to kind of think, okay, I can kind of calculate when I was conceived. Okay, my dad was a Scorpio, my mum was a Taurus, my sister's a Leo, and I'm an Aquarian. I think you see what I'm getting at, because my sister was born 9 months approximately after my dad's birthday, and I was born approximately 9 months after my mum's birthday. So my sister's joke is Jin was involved. But yeah, so I thought, well, that's really good because, so I look around the date of my mum's birthday to see, when I could have been conceived. But yeah, that was just
an
idea.
I'm sure there are many stories like that, but it's very difficult, isn't it, to get an exact date to actually create a chart. So we can make a reasonable assumption that birthday celebrations in your family have led to at least 2 births.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it's difficult, isn't it? And yet we do have these other tools to talk about that pre-birth period. I mean, within the chart itself, obviously, there's the moon's nodes, and there's the 12th house, and yes. But if we're wanting to get a little bit more detail, then, or a lot more detail, we can be looking at that period before the birth. And you said specifically looking at the new moon before the birth, the full moon before the birth, and the last eclipse before the birth, and drawing up charts for each of those.
Yeah, to see in which direction the spirit or the soul, wants to move through this particular incarnation.
So let's say we've got these 3 charts.
Yeah.
What do people do then? Do they start comparing the chart to the birth chart?
Yeah, that's what I would do. It's like, again, coming back to a personal experience. My moon's at 23 degrees Sagittarius, and the eclipse prior to that, and one I feel connected to, is the eclipse in the December prior, which was at 23 degrees Sagittarius, around about the 13th of December 1955. And that to me, and looking at that, and funny enough, my best friend at school was born around that date, and we kind of had an affinity, the two of us, until, we both loved travel, which was very a Sagittarian thing. I kind of went in one direction after a while, and she went into another direction in a while. There was a lot of planets at that time along the Sagittarian Capricorn axis, through there, and you could see that that's the kind of person she was. She was very ambitious. She wanted to go into business, and I kind of went off on another tangent. So, but yeah, look at that, and also look at the friends you find throughout your life. Sometimes there's a connection with that eclipse, because I always seem to find people that've got a Sagittarian connection because of that eclipse. And for some strange reason as well, I seem to hone in on people with Virgo rising. They seem to, and I'm still trying to find out where in my prenatal, because there is nothing in my chart that's in Virgo except my past spirit. So I'm still trying to work on as to why I seem to connect with these people with strong Virgoan connections in their chart. So yeah, what I would do is look at the prenatal eclipse, look at the new moon or full moon before your birth, and see the comparisons in your chart, your natal chart, and maybe move it along as well with progression, and see if there's any connections as well, especially with eclipses throughout life. Because I found that there's always an eclipse at 23 degrees Sagittarius, and there's always an eclipse at 17 degrees Leo. So look at those moments throughout your life to see if events happen to you at that time, either spiritually or something that happens that moves you along spiritually at those times.
It's interesting because it's what that's making me think of is the I guess the medical astrology side of things, where you are going from that moment when, if it's a decumbiture, where the person is ill, or consultation, the moment when they first meet the practitioner, and then thereafter, what are we doing? We're looking at the moon to see the subsequent crisis charts. You're seeing that progression, in a sense, of the moon as she moves forward in time to understand more about how the illness is going to develop or not, as the case may be, hopefully will be. But we're looking at that, and it's interesting here because it's a similar idea, isn't it? You're just looking to the moon as she progresses through the cycle, and So what I'm assuming here, it's almost like we're doing a little bit of reconstruction. Um, we're going backwards, and this is going to link back to the moon in the birth chart, because after all, you were talking about your prenatal eclipse, the moon being having a link with Sagittarius, and you have the moon in Sagittarius.
Yes, yes. That's a good point, really, because especially when it comes to medical astrology and temperature charts and looking at the moon. A friend of mine who's a psychologist actually said that when you're looking at people's illnesses, look at their emotions. And that gives a good indicator as to why they've got certain illnesses. So really, emotions, the moon, could be very important part of the process.
Well, for those of us who are therapists, this is a familiar story. And, how many talks have I given on the mind-body connection and emotions? So, from with my therapist hat on. So, but coming back then to this looking back to understand the birth chart more. I think that's fascinating. There is one other aspect to this about eclipses, of course, because the moon's nodes do link in with eclipses.
Yes, 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 yeah, that's strange because my nodes are at 15 degrees of Sagittarius Gemini, and obviously the eclipse prior to me was at 23 degrees of Sagittarius. So yeah, you look at the nodes, especially when you're trying to figure out your karmic astrology, where you come from, what your past life might have been, is the south node, that's where you're coming from, and the north node is where you're going to, or what you're trying to achieve in this life. So you look at the nodes, and I would also look at the 12th house. I would look at the 8th house, because obviously that's death and taxes and transformation, and look at the 4th house because that's your roots. So I'd look at all those 4 things to try and figure out what your karma is in this life. And yes, the moon and the sun really, because the node is the moon, where the moon meets the sun, so to speak, with the eclipses. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is it's really, really lovely to look at that in that way. And of course, now I'm thinking, now that you've mentioned your north node is in Sagittarius, no wonder you are meeting Sagittarians. You've got the moon in Sagittarius, and the north node in Sagittarius, the prenatal eclipse in Sagittarius, because I have found that the north node often brings in the people who are going to help us progress towards it. So our soul's allies, maybe we can call them that, figure very much in our lives, even when, unlike you, who have got the moon in the same sign as the nodes, many people may have the nodes in a sign that is not represented in the personal planets at all, or the angles, and still they will find people coming in who are important of that sign. So I think that's a very interesting connection there to the eclipses too, the prenatal eclipses. So now let's come back to the spiritual path. How do they link specifically with spirituality? Is it simply understanding the karma involved, or is there more to it?
What karma in a chart?
So
what, karma in the chart in general, or with all the planets?
Yes. So when you were talking about the fact that you can see where the person's coming from by looking at the pre-birth period.
Yeah.
And so that the moon's nodes can show where we're going. I'm just wondering whether you are going further than that and looking at whether the person is inclined towards developing a more spiritual approach to life, or whether they are inclined to go the other way and perhaps ignore it altogether. What is your experience?
Wow, that's a big question. Right, I think it depends where the person is at the time when they bring you your charts. Where, because I do find sometimes people want to know material type stuff, like, when they're going to meet the love of their life, which has always been a big question, or are they going to be successful with their career? I find that sometimes, because I do charts for friends and family, and mostly family ask me that kind of thing. It's my close friends who kind of I'm connected with, probably through my chart as well. As I said, they're Virgo rising, or they've got Scorpio, or they get Sagittarius. And they tend to ask me the spiritual type questions as to, how they can, and it's mostly inner work, it's mostly reflective work. It's how can they connect with who they truly are. And that's when I say, well, you look at your moon because that's your emotions. And you look at to where the nodes are in the particular houses. Mine's in second to eighth, talents, resources, an issue with money, which I always have. And, it's what houses the nodes are in that kind of can indicate where you should be traveling to, where you're traveling from and where you should be traveling to. If it's your first and eighth house, it's your relationships and yourself, how to kind of look at that in a spiritual connection throughout your life. Second to eighth, it's all kind of self-explanatory when you look at the houses and the opposite. It's the duality, isn't it, in the chart? I can only take it from my own experience in the fact that it is second to eighth, and I see the eighth house more as death and transformation than other people's money. I've always worked with it like that because death fascinates me to a certain extent. Well, it fascinates everybody, but it seems to fascinate me more. And I think I've been doing a bit of work with Bethia Jones on the asteroids and coming to a grand conclusion as to why I'm fascinated by death. So that's where my South Node is. So yeah, it's all about death with me. And yet, the North Node being in the second house, I've got to live life, especially in Sagittarius, you live life to the full. So, but do I get spiritual experiences by traveling, by reading philosophy, by delving into the mystery, so to speak? And that I find moves me spiritually. So that's what I usually say to my friends who come to me when they ask spiritual questions. I say, well, look at your North Node, see where the eclipses are hitting you, and that will kind of give you some sort of flavour or indication about perhaps where you should move on to next.
So, sorry.
Yeah, no. I don't get into past lives enough because I've done a bit of past life work on myself, and I find that, I think people should find their own way through dreams and astrology into where perhaps their past lives could have been them. I've always found that when people come to me and they say, "Oh, I like my sister, she's into Chinese," or my friend Brenda, she's into she's into Africa and that. And I think sometimes you can think, well, it's like me. I'm really interested in the 17th century, so I'm sure I lived in the 17th century. That kind of thing.
Familiarity, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so let's do it a different way then.
Yeah.
Let's see, you're looking at a chart.
Yeah.
And because in your talk, you were talking about specific people who clearly had a great interest in spirituality or religion. So you look at a chart, and is there something that would leap out at you and go, this is somebody who has a great interest in spirituality. And what I'm talking about, of course, is in terms of the prenatal eclipses or the nodes. Is there anything in particular that says to you, I wonder if this person is doing something, that's highly religious or spiritual?
Right. Again, that's a good question. I mean, I've looked at the chart of Dalai Lama, and although people said they saw spiritual things within that chart, I really couldn't. I suppose if looking at the chart, I would look at 12th house. I would look at anything in Pisces, and I'd look at Jupiter being in the North Node. I would look at prenatal eclipses. I would look at see if there's anything spiritual I can see in that, like 12th house stuff. I suppose 12th house, 8th house, and 4th house I'd be looking at, and any planets they're in, especially in the eclipse or especially the node. That's what I think I'd look at to see if they're on this spiritual journey in this life.
In your talk, you also talk about the part of spirit. So tell us about the part of spirit.
Well, part of spirit is the opposite to the part of fortune. How you calculate it, it is more lunar based. So not a lot of people use that, and I was kind of really amazed when I found that that's the only thing I've got in Virgo, is my part of spirit at 10 degrees. And it's really funny you should say that, because I met someone once who I kind of was friend with for a couple of years, and her son was on my part of spirit. And I always remembered her birthday. And it's really funny because when we met and when we talked, it would always be on a spiritual dimension. And that's what she wanted to do. And she seemed to think that, I could help her with that through astrology and through tarot card readings. So, yeah, if you can calculate your part of spirit very easily enough, using solar fire, you can include it in your calculations there. And when you look at it, yes, see what house it's in, see what it connects to, and that again might give you some kind of indication on where you can go with it. Although I always kind of think to myself, it's in Virgo, and I am no way a Virgo type personality. So that intrigues me more than anything. And so when I find friends who've got Virgo rising, or their sun on my part of spirit, or moon in Virgo, then I kind of find a connection with them. I try to see what they're trying to teach me in a way about my own journey.
Well, just thinking about that, Virgo is ultimately about purity and about the sifting of information to get to the truth of the matter. And so, that's I think a very important aspect of Virgo. It's the clean systems, the pure systems that are going to enable life to thrive. And
you always seen it as a service type.
It is of service because everything that Virgo does ultimately is supposed to be of service to humanity as well, in a way. So
it's the duality with Pisces. Because sometimes when you are helping others, you're giving of yourself, you're sacrificing something to help other people. So the Virgo Pisces axis, I think, it's probably a very spiritual axis from that perspective.
And I think it's the element of purity, because it's the maiden, and that's about purity. So it's the purity of giving, but I think Virgo, it's a Mercury sign. So it's
Mm.
going to be about information. It's about taking all the stuff that all the information that we've been collecting um, through our curiosity, but actually then sifting through it and seeing what is worth holding on to, and what is, sorting out, literally. This is a harvest sign, and we talk
Well,
about sorting out the wheat from the chaff, really. And
yeah. See, that's what I always intrigues me about Virgo because it is the maiden, and you can go back right back to Sumerian and Babylonian times when it originated, and it was always about the woman, the maiden, and then it kind of got Mercury attached to it, and that I find intriguing as to how did, and they, from the work that I've read, it was the fact that, you know, writing and information and knowledge got attached to the goddess who was attached to Virgo, and that's how the two got connected.
but
Um,
also the element of healing
mm,
comes in, because these goddesses were healing goddesses as well.
yeah, yeah,
And,
they were.
and Mercury, again, through knowledge, bringing the knowledge to heal. So I
Yeah,
think that there's quite a lot there, in terms of purity and service. But ultimately, I come back to the need to sort out the wheat from the chaff, and knowing, you've got all this data in front of you. What's relevant, what's not relevant? How do we prioritize? There's all this wonderful knowledge of herbs. How can we create a system to be able to match the right herb to the right person, or let alone the right
yeah.
illness? So
But
all these things are very Virgo.
yeah, but again, you've hit the nail on the head because with Mercury connected to Virgo, you've got to pass this information on, haven't you? Either by writing or orally. And that's where Mercury again gets connected to Virgo and the healing arts because, yeah, how do you pass that knowledge on from one generation to another if it's not by writing? And, is it the way writing developed, because they had to pass this information on?
It's vital, actually. Have recently been rereading the wonderful Marcos Patchett, medical astrologer and herbalist. His book, The Secret Life of Chocolate, the original one. I know
Mm,
he's got a revised version that's just recently come out. But in that original, there's a point at which he is talking about the challenge of medicine before we had systems by which we can share information.
mm,
It being not that medicine as it was practiced was not effective. So herbalism was never not effective.
mm,
However, what we lacked was the opportunity or the means by which information could be easily shared and disseminated. So you could have a wonderful herbalist in one part of the country who's discovered that herbs used in a particular way are going to be effective in a certain illness.
yeah.
But they have no means of quickly getting that information to the other side of the country. So what works for this herbalist might not be working for the other one because they're not doing the exact same thing. So,
Yeah.
and I think that that's a very, so what you've just said there made me think of that, because yes, that mercurial aspect is huge because it's about that dissemination of information.
Mm,
So if you now come back, and we're working with your chart in a sense here because we're wanting
yeah.
to illustrate how this would work. So here you are, Sagittarius North Node,
Mm,
Sagittarius prenatal eclipses, and Sagittarius is very much about meaning, and
yeah.
really wanting to find the meaning, make sense of the world in that bigger picture sense. But in order to do that, you still have to have done the sifting of
beforehand. Yeah.
you still do, because otherwise what Sagittarius will do is just get lost in it all.
Hmm.
That
Yeah,
refining
I
is,
suppose that's why I like origins so much. I like to find out how things started. That's why I'm so interested in Sumerian and Babylonian, because really that's where writing kind of originated from, also with Egypt. But my thoughts are, what happened prior to writing? What happened prior to hieroglyphs and things like that? How was information, spread all around? I mean, they were hunter-gatherers. They probably all met up and shared information through stories or, communicating and things like that. So Mercury is always there in that Virgoan aspect. But also one thing I was just thinking of when you said, how did information go from A to B? Another thing they have to think about is, well, did they have the same herbs and vegetation in two different areas? So how did that work? If they say, oh, you've got to have such and such. And could that be how trade started? Because they would say, well, we got the seeds for this. We'll give them to you if you give your seeds for that, and you can grow them. I
yeah.
don't know. That's probably my imagination going into overload. That
But it's okay. So we come back to what we have here is mutable signs.
yeah,
And, and if you think about that process of the mutable signs, where Gemini is brilliant at collecting information for information's sake. What's the name of this? What's the name of that? And then sharing the information just for the joy of sharing. Whereas you
yeah,
come to Virgo and there's a much greater focus. I want to learn something that's going to be useful. So I'm going to
yeah.
be sorting things. Um, I I used to years ago um, be on LBC doing an astrology phone in with the wonderful Peter Deely in the middle of the night, and he was a Virgo, and his thing always was he wanted information that was useful.
Okay. Yeah.
It's such a Virgo thing, I'm very happy to learn anything that's useful. But if I don't see a use in it, I'm not going to waste my time. So it's that narrowing down, that sifting to get
Yeah.
to the purification of knowledge. Let's refine it. Let's refine it so that by the time we get to Sagittarius, well, what does it all mean?
Yeah.
What does it all
And then when you get to Pisces, it's like, okay, we move on.
we move on? Yeah, it's the letting go to
Go.
allow, it's the letting go. So I think just coming back there, if we're looking, just to give people the questions I've been asking you
Yeah.
are extremely difficult, because what I've been asking you to do is to pinpoint certain factors of the chart.
Yeah.
And yet I know full well, and you know full well, that the chart, that's too reductionist to fully understand the chart.
You've got to
But
see
for
it in the whole.
purposes, for teaching purposes, we always have to break things down and say, okay, this element shows us this element shows us that. And yes, of
Yeah.
course, we have to put it back together. So the questions I've been asking you are, of course, very difficult by nature, because, when you say, I meet Sagittarians and they're very important to me. Yeah, you would. You've got the moon in Sagittarius.
Mm.
But there's more to it, because there's this North Node in Sagittarius, and there's this prenatal eclipse in Sagittarius, which means this, as we know in a chart where we've got things in threes or more, it's
Mm.
chart shouting with a megaphone, hey, look over here, this is important. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And of course, now to the meaning of things, no
Yeah.
wonder then this is an interest of yours, that you are looking at astrology through the karmic lens, through the lens of spirituality. So,
Mm.
and that's the way it works. And that's why it was good that we had your chart here, to as an example. And just for the fun of it, everyone should know that my Virgo is at my ascendant is at 10 degrees Virgo, which is your.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And so there it is.
Yeah.
So yes, the links are certainly there, and they are there for everyone. So we encourage everyone to play with your chart, find out your prenatal eclipses, have some fun looking at those prenatal full moons and new moons. One final question for you, which I think we need to address, because there are people who are watching this who will be going, yeah, but I was born on a full moon. So what do I do? Do I go back to the previous full moon, or is it just the new moon that, from the cycle that I would look at?
That's a really good question. I think if you're born, and I've seen people born on a full moon and born on the, well, their friend was born on the eclipse. I think that brings your life into, if you're born at a full moon, it, or a new moon, or an eclipse, I think that's the moment you have to focus on. You can, if you want, look at previous new moon or full moon, depending on whether, whatever you were born on. But I think that means your life is focused. It's going to take you on a certain path. I've seen it in a friend of mine has a daughter who was born on a full moon in Taurus Scorpio, and she really is on this. If she's doing something wrong, life tells her, don't, you've got to go in this direction. And if she's going on the right path, it comes really easy to her. So, and I've seen that before. So I think if you're born on a full moon or new moon, look at that. Look at that in your chart. See the aspects to it. What house is it in? Because I think life is giving you a clear-cut path to navigate through.
Excellent.
You agree?
Excellent. So what we are saying then is that in the context of karmic astrology, and where we've been talking about prenatal eclipses and encouraging everyone to look at the moon, the full moon or the new moon that directly precedes the birth, in the event that you were born either at a new moon or a full moon, then it means that your path is emphasized in some way by virtue of the fact that you were born exactly on a full moon or on a new moon. Okay. Yes. All right. Well, we again invite everyone to go and play and experiment, because this is the way in which we all gather information, learn and grow. So Gill, thank you very much for your time today.
No, thank you for inviting me back. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be looking at predictive astrology. Until then, goodbye.